Hey guys, I just wanted to talk today about some perk design and balancing issues and some specialties and yeah, maybe a little bit on some equipment a little bit later. But I want to mostly talk about perks and perk design and perk balance and perk slots. And I want to start with perk one slot, right? So I wanted to talk about perk design and perk balance and some baffling decisions I think that don't really make a lot of sense to me within the context of how these perks are laid out and the perk specialties and whatnot. And I want to start with I think it was dexterity and gung ho is what I talked about first. So in the perk one slot, you have scavenger, ghost, ninja, flakjack, and the taskmask, and these are all easily some of the best perks in the game. Like these are incredible perks. Tag Mask, Flakjack, and Ninja and Ghost for several games in a row have been some of the most desired perks for any loadout. They're kind of the baseline. Like if you don't know what you're going to use, you go for these because these are always useful. These are always very good, especially Ninja and Ghost for if you're doing like a stealthy run and gun playstyle and you don't want to be on the minimap, you don't want to be heard. These are invaluable. Scavenger used to be kind of like a pretty good perk, but a little bit of a whatever perk. You didn't really need Scavenger. A lot of loadouts wouldn't use it at all. A lot of builds didn't have to use Scavenger in older games. So in a lot of older COD games, even recent COD games, Scavenger is like pretty fine, pretty good perk, useful. You get your ammo back on kills, you get your throwing knives back, that's fine, whatever. Not the most important perk, not incredibly useful in all loadouts. A lot of times you wouldn't need it because, okay, you're not using throwing knives or you already have a lot of reserve ammo, like if you're using LMG, you didn't really need it. But now, if you didn't know, Scavenger resupplies equipment, which is your lethal and your tactical, and it will do all of your equipment. Well, it'll do one of each, but any equipment that you have in any slot, aside from field upgrade, because it's not equipment, it's a field upgrade, it'll give you one back on a kill. And since Scavenger now resupplies your equipment from enemies, your lethal and your tactical, one of each, it has taken it from a pretty whatever perk that you may or may not use because your build might not be super reliant on throwing knives or you have a lot of reserve ammo. It's become one of the strongest run and gun perks in the game. Like by far, bar none. This is incredibly useful. You can get smokes back, you can resupply a stim immediately, you can get flashbangs, concussions, frag grenades, semtex, impact grenades, molotovs, whatever you're using as a run and gun player, you will get back if you run over and pick it up off the guy you killed, which is invaluable for a run and gun player because it means you don't need quartermaster. Like you don't need quartermaster to get your stuff back, and you can get it back every time you kill somebody, which can just keep the momentum rolling, especially if you're using equipment to kill a lot and you're good at using it. So now in this game, Scavenger is highly competitive with Ghost, Ninja, Flakjack, and Taskmask. Like it is easily on the same value. I would argue in many cases this is higher value than Ghost or Taskmask. Maybe not the Flakjack or Ninja, but higher value than Ghost or Taskmask. I would argue that readily. I would say that is absolutely true. So Scavenger is an incredible perk now, and this makes sense in this slot against Ghost, Ninja, Flakjack, and Taskmask, which are, as I said, some of the most valuable perks in the entire series. And then we have Dexterity and Gung Ho. And if you ever played Cold War, I don't know how this was in Call of Duty games before Cold War, because I played original Modern Warfare 3, and then I didn't buy any Call of Duty game until Cold War, because I really liked Black Ops 1 when I was younger. It was my favorite Call of Duty game. Probably still is. It's definitely up there. In Cold War, Gung Ho let you sprint, let you hip fire while sprinting. And this was like an incredibly fun, if somewhat gimmicky playstyle. But the thing about Perk 1 slot is that these are playstyle defining perks. These are perks that you pick because they enable, to the most broad extent, the way you want to play the game with that loadout. Gung Ho was a playstyle defining perk in Cold War, and now it is a light utility perk in the playstyle defining perk slot. It improves sprint and tactical speeds while reloading or using equipment, which is helpful to an extent because you can use equipment and reload while sprinting around while being mobile. But it is not on the level of Ninja, of Ghost, of Scavenger, of Flakjack, of Tac Mask. It is not providing that same utility. These perks are that same playstyle enabling potential that these perks are giving you. It is shoring up a weakness, or giving you a little bit more mobility, like flexibility to move around while doing things, but it is not making you move silently, or giving you equipment back for killing people, or making you invisible on the radar, or making you preventing you from dying to explosives instantly, right? It's not doing that for you. Gung Ho is out of place in this perk slot because it is not playstyle defining anymore, right? Dexterity, similar situation. Reduced weapon motion while jumping, sliding, and diving, take less fall damage. These are useful in certain contexts or with certain weapons, but this does not define a playstyle. Now, there is a context in which it somewhat defines a playstyle, or at least heavily enables one, and that is, I think, quick scoping. This makes it easier to jump shot and whatnot. But this doesn't do what these other perks do to any similar extent. This gives you a little bit more reliability while shooting and moving, right? It's not Ninja. It's not Scavenger. It's not Ghost. These two perks are on the same level as Double Time, or on the same level as Fast Hands, right? These aren't really so, like, heavily valuable that they belong in this perk slot. So we have 3 red perks, 2 blue perks, and 2 green perks, right? These are... Each slot has a similar spread. So the first slot has 3 red, the second slot has 3 blue, third slot has 3 green. The problem is, with these 2 perks, you tighten the options that you actually have for red perks for an enforcer specialty, right? Because these are not worth foregoing Scavenger, in my opinion. I don't think that there is almost any context in which I would rather have Gung Ho or Dexterity over Scavenger, except maybe like a quickscope build, right? Which is an incredibly narrow use case, and it makes Dexterity something of a one-note type of build, or type of perk. And Enforcer is already a combat specialty that is somewhat limited in its value compared to the other combat specialties. I would argue it's the weakest one. And limiting its good perk options this much only contributes to that problem. Right, so on the subject of combat specialties, let's talk about Recon, and let's talk about Ghost and Ninja. So the big problem with Ghost and Ninja is that they're both blue perks, right? And everybody already knows that Perk Greed is easily the most flexible and useful wildcard in the game. It was in Cold War, even though it's a lot worse in this game because you only get 1 extra perk, it's still the best one. And that's not to say that the other wildcards are terrible. I think every wildcard in this game is actually pretty useful. I don't think you need to go for specialties, and I also think that if you use a different wildcard, you still have enough good options that the wildcard offsets the loss of Perk Greed and the lessened perk flexibility, right? I think wildcards in this game are in a pretty good state, though I think they could be a little bit better balanced. But we're looking at Ghost and Ninja here, right? And if you know anything, if you've been paying attention to the discourse at all, you already know that the Recon combat specialty is easily the best one, and it's the best one in a way that is probably unhealthy for the game right now. Now, if you don't know about it, enemies can be seen through walls for a short time after respawn. This is the feature that is a problem. The other ones here, HUD Edge Indicator, which is High Alert, and No Death Skulls, which is, I can't remember. These are fine. These are fine to have on Recon. I think they make sense. See through walls for a short time after respawn is insane. If you played the game, you've seen this. They show up as like a red thermal sort of silhouette, right? And they put this combat specialty on access from 2 of the most desired perks in the entire series, Ghost and Ninja, in every single COD game for going back probably a good decade or more now. Easily 2 of the strongest perks, bar none. Everybody likes to have these if they can have them, unless they're going for a build that requires different perks, right? These are like the ones you go for if you don't. see value in other perks, or you don't see enough value in other perks. You're having these. Ghost and Ninja. Ninja makes you silent. Your footsteps silent, I mean, and Ghost keeps you off the minimap. Great. Fantastic. They... Two of the strongest perks on the strongest combat specialty, and it's a combat specialty that is unhealthy for the game. Because with Recon, being able to see enemies through walls for a short time after respawn, it's not only an incredibly like useful and strong utility, it's also a utility that prevents players from being able to play in a stealthy run and gun manner, because there is no counter perk. And I don't think there should be a counter perk, because I don't think there should be a feature. Adding a counter perk would just railroad people into using the counter perk to counter the clearly unreasonable utility of Recon. It also has the effect of causing players who use the specialty to have worse game sense and worse awareness, because they become reliant on it for all their information off spawn. They're going to use their minimap less. They're going to be paying attention to their audio less. They're going to be paying attention to a lot of details of like where their teammates are less. They're not going to be developing good game sense relying on the Recon specialty for their information. So it's a specialty that makes players worse at the game while also making the game worse for other players. And I think that's a massive problem on its own. And it's made worse by the fact that it is accessible with Perk Greed for players to have it with both Ghost and Ninja. And what this means is that somebody can die and respawn, and they have not only all of your positional data on the map, but you can't even see them on your minimap, and you can't hear them if they're moving around. So they have all the information, and you have none about them, right? That's a big problem. That's a huge problem. And with Perk Greed, they have so much perk flexibility to run Ghost and Ninja, right? And then they only need one other blue perk to get Recon. And they have three incredible options of the Perk 2 slot with Forward Intel, Tracker, and Engineer. And in Perk 3, they have Vigilance and Cold-Blooded. And you could run like, you could run like Ninja, Ghost, Tracker, which is, if you haven't used Tracker, I highly recommend it. The ping mechanic is incredible. If you're using thermals, it works through smokes. It might work through smokes normally. I don't think so. That would be kind of messed up if it did. But yeah, I highly recommend trying Tracker out. It's really strong. And if you use Tracker, you can run Double Time, you can run Quartermaster, Gearhead, or if you run Cold-Blooded or Vigilance, you can run, well, honestly, the green and red perks in slot 2 are not my favorite, but Dispatcher is pretty good. If you're running like UAV and HARP, this makes it a lot easier to get them. But in general, I would run a Perk 2 blue slot and then something from Perk 3 that's not blue, or even even something that is blue if you feel like it. But Double Time, Quartermaster, Gearhead, those would be my go-tos in almost every context. So Recon not only being what it is in the current state of the game, but also being accessible while using Ghost and a Ninja, centralizes the entire game around Recon, because the Recon user can have all the information while giving you none. That's the problem, right? And if we look at the Enforcer combat specialty, right? Killing enemies grants a temporary buff to movement speed and health regen rate. This, in concept, is really cool. This is really good in concept. The problem is, if an Enforcer player kills a Recon user, when the Recon user respawns, they know where the guy who killed them is, and they know where he's going. So you don't really get to use Enforcer to run and gun, because an Enforcer user doesn't have the opportunity to counter the anti-run and gun combat specialty, right? You don't deliver these benefits if the guy you killed is able to see your exact position, the direction you're moving, and then chase you for it, right? It essentially punishes the Enforcer user for killing you by giving the Recon user easy information on how to get revenge, right? So Enforcer is an interesting combat specialty and concept that is made so much weaker by Recon existing the way it is, right? So I wanted to talk about potential solutions to the Recon and Ninja problem here real quick. Starting with suggestions for how to make Recon less of an oppressive and abusive combat specialty. And I've seen suggestions thrown around for Recon to be changed from seeing enemies through walls for a short time after respawn to having a UAV sweep or a scout pulse ping after respawn, right? I think that'd be a fine change that maintains the spirit of the Recon combat specialty um, without being so oppressive and powerful against other players. I wanted to suggest something else that might be a little more like creative and interesting strategically to use, and that is to have it give additional bonuses to equipment and field upgrades, and perhaps attachments as well, that reveal something or suppress information from enemy players. And what I mean by that is, like, say you have a spy cam, right? When you say you have a Recon and a spy cam, Recon could make it so that the spy cam has a longer duration to its mark, right? Or it has a wider like radius on the circle to target enemy players and equipment, right? Or with the prox alarm, perhaps the prox alarm will briefly ping a player that it detects, right? And similarly with field upgrades, you could, like, the scrambler could have a wider radius. The acoustic amp could make players using Ninja a little bit louder even than they are now when using it. Recon could be a supplement to equipment that reveals or suppresses information from enemy players. Like, it could make it so perhaps UAV sweeps last a little bit longer when they ping enemies, or, you know, maybe the scout pulse lasts for one longer pulse. And that's an interesting way I think that Recon could be changed to integrate more strategically with the equipment you're using and the playstyles you're going for. That could be interesting to be done on top of the Scout Pulse or UAV sweep change that people have suggested. I think that would be fine, honestly. And to mention the UAV sweep or Scout Pulse idea, it would also be a better change because those are vulnerable to being countered by Ghost, which means that if you're an Enforcer user using Ghost with Perk Greed, then you become resistant to the effects of Recon, and it no longer is a counter to your running gun playstyle. I think that'd be pretty good. I would like that. That would make sense to me. I think Enforcer should stay the exact way it is, with the caveat that a change I'm about to suggest should be made, and that is Ninja should not be a blue perk. This is unreasonable to be a blue perk, given how strong Recon is, and I don't think that any number of changes to Recon is going to make it less than the best specialty. And I think it's fine if it's the best specialty if its perk choices are a little bit more limited. And what I think should happen here is that Ninja should be turned into a red perk. And the reason for that is that while Ghost and Tracker, Engineer, Forward Intel, and Vigilance Gold-Blooded, these are all Recon Intel based perks meant for, like, manipulating information on the battlefield, Ninja is that to a small extent. It manipulates the information people have about you via audio, but more than anything, that utility serves running and gunning. Because if you're not moving, Ninja doesn't do anything. If you're moving slowly, Ninja does very little. If you're moving quickly, Ninja does a lot. The more you're moving, the more Ninja finds its utility, which makes Ninja more of a perk geared towards running and gunning than towards manipulating information. And if you put Ninja, which I would argue, and I think many people would agree, is the most important, strongest perk in the game, and maybe in the series, if you put Ninja as a red perk, it gives Enforcer more flexibility and utility as a combat specialty by giving it more flexible access to Ninja without needing Perk Greed. And if you use Perk Greed, then you can have an Enforcer setup with both Ninja and Ghost, or with Ninja and Flak Jacket, right? Ninja being a red perk would make Enforcer better and make Recon a little bit harder to take advantage of without sacrificing some good perks. Now, the problem with this suggestion is, of course, that if you make Ninja a red perk, there is suddenly only one blue perk and 4 red perks in the perk 1 category. And I would be comfortable with swapping Ninja and Scavenger's place, because while I have already outlined how Scavenger is very much a run and gun type of perk, and this would kind of run contrary to that suggestion, Scavenger is In any case, I would say a universal utility perk. It is a strong perk in all cases, but it is uniquely strong with a run and gun playstyle. But a reconnaissance loadout is going to have equipment that is useful for reconnaissance, like spy cams and stuff like that. And recon loadouts are also not typically just sitting in one place because Ghost requires you to be moving. You're going to be moving around anyways. You're just not going to be running and gunning like you are with Ninja. So Scavenger is a roaming perk, but it is flexible enough that you could justify it as a blue perk, whereas I don't believe Ninja is flexible enough that you can justify it as a blue perk, but you can justify it as a red perk. And I think if you swapped these two perks, you would still have strong perk competition in blue with Ghost and Scavenger. And Perk agreed with Perk Read, you could still have a full red setup with Ninja, Double Time, Assassin maybe, and then Scavenger as your flex perk in your Perk Greed slot, right? This doesn't solve the problem of Gung Ho and Dexterity, though. Talking about Gung Ho again, real quick, if you implemented the original version of Gung Ho where you can hip fire while sprinting, it would reintroduce that competition in the red perk slot against Ninja. It would interface better with the omni sprinting mechanic because being able to hip fire while sprinting in Cold War was already a really fun and strong utility. And in Black Ops 6, with omni sprinting, being able to omni sprint left, right, and backwards and hip fire while moving at that speed, it would make even more sense in this game than it did in Cold War. But yeah, if Gung Ho was changed to allow you to hip fire while sprinting again, I think it would really reintroduce its value and make it a lot more competitive in this perk slot against Scavenger, Ghost, Ninja, Flak Check, and Tech Mask. And I really, really hope they make that change because it was easily one of the most fun perks in Cold War, and it would just make so much sense with Omni Sprinting in this game. But yeah, I think you could swap Scavenger and Ninja, and you would make massive improvements to the perk system just as it is, even without changes to Recon. And with changes to Recon, I think you would have a much healthier perk meta. Perk balance would be a lot more interesting. More creative loadouts would be encouraged. I think run and gun and rowing builds would be about as flexible as they are now, but they would be using the Enforcer perk package more than the Recon perk package. Because right now, because Ninja's a blue perk, it's better to run and gun as a Recon user than as an Enforcer user, which is contrary to what I think the intended design of Enforcer is because of the movement speed and health regen rate. This is about getting you around the map faster after kills and getting you healed up faster after kills. This is about you being ready to fight sooner and ready to fight somewhere further away from where you were, which is usually towards the enemy spawn, right? Ninja is a perfect perk for the red combat specialty, the Enforcer combat specialty, right? And it's just too good as a Recon perk. And I think that's about all I wanted to say about perk balance and perk design. And if I upload this and you watch it and you like what I had to say and you thought a little bit more critically about design and balance in Call of Duty, then well, I'm glad to hear it. I think that, sort of as closing words about balance and design, I think it's important to keep in mind that, of course, designing and balancing a game at the scale and complexity of Call of Duty is not easy. It's not an easy job. There are a lot of moving parts here, and there's a lot of things that are easy to miss or overlook. And when doing armchair design suggestions, like I'm talking about here, it's very easy to overlook the scope of design, the knock-on effects of any given change, or the intent of the design, right? It's very easy as a player to not grasp the totality of designing a game like this. And it's easy to miss the forest for the trees, I guess. So nothing I say regarding suggestions should be taken as a informed prescription. These are mostly vibes I'm operating on, observations based on my gameplay. And while I think it is true that the intent of design is somewhat lost once you release the design, and what becomes the intent is what players experience, it is important to remember that design is as much an art and as much about a crafted intended experience as are the graphics and the assets produced by the talented artists at Treyarch. Everything about the way the game is played is not just like an emergent product of putting a bunch of mechanics in a blender. There is some designer, some lead designer, somebody who has a vision for how this game is supposed to look and feel in motion and how these mechanics are supposed to interplay, right? And suggestions to changes may not align with that vision. So while we can absolutely point out problems and relay those problems to designers, we should measure our language and our the strength in which we speak about suggested changes, because we don't know what that intent is, and it's entirely possible that the changes that they could make to address these problems can be better served to that vision, and that vision, when realized better, is more fun than the game that we think we want to play. We can't know what that vision is. We really can't unless they talk about it, which I would hope they would. I love to hear what designers have to say about the games that they've worked on. I think it would be very interesting to hear what lead designers at Treyarch wanted to have be experienced in Black Ops 6. I would love to hear what they would say was their intention, and if they feel like the game as it is played now meets that intention. I love to hear from the horse's mouth. You know, I want to hear what designers have to say about the game. So, anyways, I think that's about all I had to say about designing perks and balancing perks in Black Ops 6. There are a lot of problems with this game, but I love it to death. I wanted to clarify that this is maybe one of my favorite Call of Duty games ever made. Easily top 5. It is incredibly fun when it hits its stride, and there are just some pain points with the design that I think, to me, keep it from meeting the potential that it has. I am grateful that you watched and listened this long, and hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you later.